Imagine you are a wealthy merchant, a master of trade with gold in your pockets and a family waiting for you back home. You stop for a simple lunch of bread and dates under the shade of a tree. But with one casual flick of your wrist, you accidentally commit a crime so grave that an ancient, towering monster appears from the dust to demand your head. This is the story that started it all. Today, in this explainer, we're diving deep into the very first tale of the legendary 1001 Nights, a place where storytelling is literally a matter of life and death.
So, could a simple date stone cost you your life? I know it sounds absolutely absurd to us today, but in the ancient magical realism of this classic text, it's a deadly reality. Picture our wealthy merchant, resting in the blazing desert heat. He reaches into his saddlebags, pulls out a piece of bread and a dried date. He finishes his lunch, and without a second thought, just tosses the date stone away. He is blissfully, utterly unaware of the fatal mistake he just made.
Suddenly, that peaceful midday heat is completely shattered. A massive pillar of smoke and dust rises from the earth, and it rapidly takes the shape of an enormous, towering Efrit with actual fire sparks shooting from his eyes. He brandishes a massive, drawn sword, bearing down on the trembling merchant, screaming a terrifying accusation. He claims that the casually thrown date stone struck his invisible son right in the chest, killing him instantly.
Now, you might be wondering, what exactly is an Efrit? According to the ancient footnotes in our source text, they aren't just your run-of-the-mill spirits. They're a profoundly powerful, often evil class of jinni, said to be created from smokeless fire thousands of years before humanity even existed. So the merchant isn't just dealing with some local bandit here. He's facing down a primordial force of nature, a being of gigantic stature and immense, terrifying power.
And the creature's roar is just absolutely chilling. He screams, "Rise, that I may kill thee as thou hast killed my son." You see, to the Efrit, there's no such thing as manslaughter or an innocent accident. The ancient, unyielding rule of the desert applies here. Blood for blood. The merchant pleads, weeping, crying out that he had no idea the invisible son was even there. It was a freak accident. But the monster is entirely deaf to his pleas.
In that moment, the merchant is struck with a horrifying realization. As the sources state, fate had decreed against him. He realizes this wasn't just a streak of bad luck, it was his inescapable destiny. Overwhelmed, he begins to weep bitterly, reciting poetry lamenting his doom, crying out that only fruit-bearing trees are assailed with stones, and mourning how the safety of the night often just breeds the bane of tomorrow. Which brings us to the next chapter of our story, a one-year respite. Realizing he absolutely cannot fight this supernatural executioner, the merchant does something interesting. He doesn't beg for a full pardon because he knows the ancient laws of blood. Instead, he just asks for a temporary delay to go home and settle his earthly affairs. He binds himself by a solemn vow, a strict covenant with God as his witness, promising to return to this exact deadly spot at the head of the new year. And surprisingly enough, the furious jinni accepts this promise and just vanishes. So the clock is literally ticking. How does he spend his final year? Well, he returns home to a family that just bursts into agonizing wailing and weeping. Month by month, he painstakingly pays everyone their due, settles his massive trading empire, and appoints guardians for his kids. Finally, at the end of the year, in a deeply morbid scene, he performs his final ablutions, literally takes up his own burial shroud, his grave clothes, and bids his family a final, heartbreaking farewell. He goes forth, as the text says, in spite of himself. Now, we enter the final act. The Garden of Fate. True to his word, our merchant arrives back at that exact same garden on New Year's Day, weeping in solitude as he waits for his executioner. But he isn't alone for long. One by one, 3 mysterious elders, or sheikhs, approach him. And what's super weird is that each one is accompanied by a very specific, unusual animal. The first leads a chained gazelle, the second has 2 black hounds, and the third arrives with a dapple bay mule. Each elder is totally baffled to find a lone merchant crying in a place known to be a hangout for evil spirits. Once they hear his tragic tale, they are so moved by his incredible honor in keeping his vow that they decide to stick around and see what happens. And wow, the tension here is just palpable. Almost as soon as they sit down, a mighty wind kicks up. A massive revolving pillar of dust. A huge sand devil advances from the desert waste. The dust cloud rips open, and there he is. The towering jinni steps out, his drawn sword gleaming, eyes literally shooting fire sparks of rage. He marches right up, drags the wailing merchant away from the elders, and prepares to deliver the fatal blow.
But here's where we see redemption through storytelling. Right as the blade is about to fall, the first sheikh, the one with the gazelle, steps boldly between the merchant and the monster. He proposes a truly daring trade. He says, "If I tell thee the story of myself and this gazelle, and thou find it more wondrous than this merchant's plight, wilt thou grant me a third of his blood?" The Jinni, maybe just intrigued by the sheer audacity of this old man, actually agrees to the high-stakes wager. One wondrous story in exchange for 1/3 of a man's life.
So the first sheikh begins. He reveals that this chained gazelle isn't a normal animal at all. She's actually his own cousin and wife. In a fit of dark jealousy, she had used wicked magic to transform his concubine into a cow and his beloved son into a calf, nearly tricking the sheikh into slaughtering them. It's this dark, twisted tale of family betrayal and enchantments, which ends with the son being restored by another sorceress and the wicked wife being cursed to live out her days as a chained gazelle. The Jinni is absolutely captivated. He listens to this wild tale of magic and, staying true to his word, declares it to be exceedingly strange and wondrous. And just like that, he remits the first third of the merchant's blood debt. Think about that. A third of the man's life was literally just bought back with a story. Seeing this actually work, the second elder steps up, points to his 2 black hounds, and offers the exact same wager. And his story is just as thrilling. The hounds, they're actually his 2 treacherous brothers. After our sheikh saved him from financial ruin over and over, they repaid his kindness by trying to murder him and his new wife, who, twist, happened to be a powerful Jinniya in disguise. The Jinniya wife saved him, and as punishment, turned the wicked brothers into dogs for 10 years. The Efrit, totally mesmerized again, grants the second third of the merchant's blood.
Finally, the third elder steps forward with his dapple bay mule. We get this rapid-fire tale of magical revenge. The mule is his wife, who caught him off guard, sprinkled him with dark magic water, and turned him into a dog. But after he was rescued and turned back to human form by a clever butcher's daughter, he completely turned the tables on his wife, transforming her into the very mule standing right there.
And this perfectly illustrates the sheer power of stories. This escalating sequence of unbelievable, wondrous tales did something that weapons or wealth could literally never do. It completely subdued a monster of fire. The text describes the Jinni as actually shaking with pure delight. He's so thrilled by these incredible stories that he sheaths his sword and completely forgives the merchant's accidental crime. Through the loyalty of complete strangers and the intoxicating power of storytelling, the merchant is saved from certain death. The Jinni vanishes into thin air, and the merchant joyfully embraces the 3 sheikhs.
Now, we absolutely cannot forget the most important layer of this entire narrative. Just as those elders told stories to save the merchant from the sword, a brilliant woman named Shahrazad is telling this very story to King Shahryar. Why? Because the king is a tyrant who executes his wives the morning after marrying them. Shahrazad is using the exact same survival tactic, telling a wondrous story to beguile the king, delay her execution, and save her own life. This tale is such a brilliant reminder that even in the face of unavoidable fate and terrifying monsters, wisdom, wit, and words can quite literally change the world. And what you should really take away from this explainer is the profound, world-altering power of a well-told story. But here's the crazy part. The merchant and the Jinni was only the very first night of Shahrazad's desperate journey. She leaves the king hanging on a cliffhanger, and he spares her just to hear the rest. There are 1,000 more nights of mind-bending, magical stories left to go. So, are you ready to see what she weaves next?